very famous book, Leviathan. What we're going to see today in Leviathan is Hobbes lay out a simple conception of human nature. Right? And the first several chapters are, I'm sorry, going to be a little bit boring and just getting some definitions down so that we can understand what Hobbes considers human nature to be. Then what Hobbes is going to do is set up basically a set of two alternatives, one being our natural condition and the other being the condition that we more commonly find ourselves in, a condition in which there is a stable community, sets of laws that protect us, etc., etc. Right? So right from the beginning, Hobbes is starting from pretty much bare bones minimum conception of human nature. Right? Now, this book you've probably noticed the reading is quite difficult. That's because it's not a translation. This is the Old English that this book was printed in, which actually got Hobbes into a bit of trouble. This book was burned. Right? This book was blamed for a series of events, and in writing this book, Hobbes managed to upset just about everyone. Right? I said that this was printed in actual Old English. Hobbes really upset the monarchy by printing it in Old English, because at the time the monarchy and the church held that the official language of academic discourse, right, intellectual discourse, was Latin. Now this limited a number of people's ability to conceive in academic terms. It limited people's education, etc., etc. Now, Hobbes, by bucking that, has shown that this is a book that's written for the people. Right? Now, the argument we're about to see in Hobbes, in this book that's written in the Old English that upset the monarchy so much, is one that actually defends the monarchy against the establishment of constitutional monarchy, one in which there is some sort of democratic restraint on the power of the aristocracy. Right? So, upon reading this book, the common people, right, were offended as well. Right? So what we find in Hobbes' Leviathan is basically a quagmire. Right? But we also find one of the most strong and stable arguments in the history of political philosophy. So I'm eager to get into this with you. Now, you can follow along with my notes online because there are a whole lot of definitions that are important to understand, but I leave that for you to refer back to. What I'm going to do today is just isolate the important ideas, and we can see how the argument that Hobbes is presenting us with emerges step by step, right? In just the most simple terms. Now, the first thing to understand about Hobbes is that he starts from a perspective in which he's an empiricist. That means that our senses are that which give us reliable knowledge of the world. Right? All knowing comes to us through the senses. Now, these senses are determined by objects that present themselves to us. So, well, here's an object, here's an object, here's an object. Our senses are determined by these real things that are in the world. Right? Now, all of thought, all of our intellectual life finds its root either directly or indirectly in the senses. Directly in the senses, here is a book, let's think about this object which we encounter. Right? It's a fairly straightforward relationship. You see a bird, you think about a bird. Right? You see a computer, you think about that object that directly impacts upon your senses. Now, this doesn't explain all of the ways that we're able to think. So what Hobbes points out is that in addition to this, we can kind of, through our imagination, create collages of different sense impressions, still finding their root in the senses. But, for example, we're able to imagine purple elephants with our grandmother riding them while she is wearing army boots. Right? Now, these things are not something we've ever actually sensed directly, but we know what elephant is, we know what purple is, we know what grandmother is, we know what army boots are. We've got sense impressions of these things, so we're able to create a sort of collage out of those various sense impressions, and that is a form of thought which we call imagination. So in any case, right, thought comes down to these sense impressions that derives from them. Now, Hobbes being an empiricist, we've seen an empiricist before. His name was Heraclitus. And what Heraclitus claimed was that everything is in a state of motion, flux, etc. Everything's in a constant state of change. This is no different from Hobbes. This means that everything that we sense is constantly changing. So reason is that faculty which hunts out, the type of change that we experience, hunts out the causes of some effect, right? We see that this kind of change has occurred. We say, well, what caused that change? And we find out through the faculty of reason. But the faculty of reason isn't quite that limited. By Hobbes' account, it is a rather limited, infallible kind of faculty, but nonetheless, right, the faculty of reason is also able to anticipate future effects of present causes, right? So I know if I drop this, it's going to fall. I know if I throw something against a wall and it's made of rubber, it's going to very likely bounce back, right? I know that if I create an explosion using a combustible material within an internal mechanism, I can harness the kinetic energy created by that explosion to power an automobile, right? So basically what Hobbes has done in his treatment of reason here is he's explained how it is that we're able to harness rationally these scientific kind of bits of knowledge and turn them into usable forms of technology, right? So right from the start, everything is pretty simple, right? We're creatures determined by our senses. All of our thought finds its root in those senses, and reason is that faculty that hunts out causes of present effects. If all of a sudden I hear the doorbell, I look around to see what made that sound and who made that sound by ringing the doorbell, right? And what's more, I'm able to anticipate future effects of present causes that I set in motion, right? So simple creatures, right? But what Hobbes wants to claim is something a little bit stronger than that. And in the next few chapters, believe it or not, this is everything that was in chapters, 1 through 5, right? That is essential to comprehending this argument. Hobbes makes a number of conceptual distinctions that are a whole lot more refined than what I've just given you here in the simple treatment, but nonetheless, right? Bare bones basics, our job is to just understand the argument that Hobbes is presenting us with. Right? So we're simple creatures, and in chapter 6 what he's going to do is lay out a further element of this simplicity. Right? We are simple creatures that have two basic drives. Right? To explain all of human endeavor, all of our volitional activity, right? We have appetites and we have aversions. We go towards that which we have an appetite for, usually something that gives us pleasure, and we move away from that which we don't have an appetite for, that which we have an aversion for, right? So we like what we like, we don't like what we don't like. We're all determined by these sense impressions. Reason, this noble faculty that Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle put on a pedestal, is just simply a causal reasoning mechanism, right? And we like what we like, we don't like what we don't like. And usually that involves some element of pleasure and pain, right? But we'll see that this actually turns into a much more interesting argument as Hobbes goes on.